We talked about a piece previously on the show from Axios titled 2024 House Majority Runs Through the Courts. And what it talks about is because whoever gets the majority after the 2024 election, Democrats or Republicans, it's going to be a narrow majority, most likely. And for that reason, and because right now we're seeing play out in courts in the rearview mirror and some that are coming up, very key decisions being made in courtrooms on congressional maps. That could be, depending on how courts decide to go on this, is the state map too gerrymandered in an unconstitutional way, or is it not in multiple states across the country? That could be what pushes one party over the edge, because that's deciding how many congressional spots will be available, how gerrymandered they can be, how advantageous they'll be to one party or the other. And so now I have for you an example of this playing out. And also it's notable because of how absurd the actions from Alabama Republicans are in regard to this story. So this is from Politico. Alabama's redistricting brawl rehashes bitter fight over voting rights. Apologies, getting cut off a little bit, but we'll proceed. A court ordered Alabama's legislature to redraw its congressional map to give black voters more power. I emphasize words strangely there. A court ordered Alabama's legislature, and then the legislature's response, not unless we have to. The GOP-dominated legislature passed a map on Friday that disregarded a lower federal court's directive, one reinforced in June by the Supreme Court, that it should include 2 districts with a black voting age majority or something quite close to it when it redraws its lines. The legislature, over the unified objections of Democrats, instead came up with a map that falls short of that, with one narrowly black majority district and one with a black voting age population of just under 40%, even as Republicans argue they are in adherence. So what's going on here is a case was decided in a federal court, then reaffirmed by the Supreme Court, that the way Alabama had drawn its congressional lines was discriminatory toward black people because it didn't give them as much representation as a more fair map would give them. And so you're disproportionately taking away the voice within our democracy of black people in Alabama to such an extent that it's unconstitutional and violates the Voting Rights Act. And so that was decided. Then Alabama now has a chance to redraw the lines to make them in adherence with this court case. And they once again don't add that second majority black district and proceed with what is clearly a violation of this decision. And so hopefully after more legal challenges, which is kind of what reporting has been indicating, we'll see more litigation, but will they just violate that litigation? We'll have to see. But either way, this is an example of how much these decisions in courts, and then I guess if the political parties adhere to the decisions, will play a role in the upcoming election. And Simone Sanders broke this down nicely on MSNBC over the weekend.
Last month, the Supreme Court handed down a surprise victory upholding Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Now, Section 2 prohibits any voting law or practice from abridging any citizen's right to vote on the basis of race or color. Well, the Supreme Court's ruling upheld a lower court's ruling that Alabama violated Section 2 of that Voting Rights Act by packing all of the state's black voters into just one congressional district. The Supreme Court ruling ordered Alabama to redraw its maps to include a second majority black district. But the Alabama state legislature seems determined not to comply. According to the Democracy Docket, there are currently more than 30 Section 2 cases being litigated across the country. Okay, and the Cook Political Report, it has already shifted 4 races from solid R to toss-up after the Supreme Court decision. So here is what Democratic Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who represents Alabama's only majority black district, told me after the Supreme Court weighed in.
The results of elections could be changed by this, but we must remember this is not about Democrats and Republicans. This is about minority representation, fair representation.
But the state government in Alabama, it doesn't seem interested in fair representation. Yesterday afternoon, Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed a new map into law, one that does not include a second black district.
Absurd.
According to Alabama House Speaker Nathan Ledbetter, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, of the United States House of Representatives, well, he actually reached out as the maps were being redrawn, and he expressed concerns about control of the House in 2024. Think about that, folks. As Republicans keep pushing conspiracy theories about the 2020 election being rigged against Republicans, some of them are actively working to dilute Black voting power in Alabama and beyond.
Right. And for this election, this plays a huge role and is a huge conversation. But just in general, it's another reason why something like the For the People Act that was introduced a while back and is not going to get through, unfortunately, that would get rid of partisan gerrymandering is so crucial. Because in some cases, this isn't even a purely political thing, even though a less gerrymandered America would be in the advantage of Democrats. But in certain areas, Democrats also use this, of course. We saw a case in New York that is now going to help Democrats because they're allowed to gerrymander their districts more. And in principle, it's bad. Obviously, I'm a little bit like, okay, if that helps, good for this next election. But in principle, it shouldn't be allowed across the board, and we should have fair representation and not these squiggly lines being drawn in such, in my opinion, broken and anti-democratic way. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before all the clips are able to be uploaded to the YouTube channel, plus get the bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.